Today's daf we're going to be learning is Yevamot Daf Hey. We are moving along. This is learning together now, the daf for Shabbat. Today's daf is sponsored by Rachel LePatin in honor of Carol LePatin with lots of love, Ima and Abba. Okay, we're going to get started now with our daf. So we started at the end of Gimel Amud Bet with this big question. Yibum in general, and the pasuk specifically, was derived from these laws of when an erva, someone who's forbidden relationship, falls to do yibum with her husband's brother, and it turns out that it's a forbidden relationship, particularly in this case, it was achot ishto, that it was his, he was married to her sister. So you might have thought that ate ase v'dachalot ase, the mitzvah of yibum overrides the mitzvah of the negative commandment to have a relationship with this woman. And yet, we need a drasha specifically to tell us, even though you would have thought the positive commandment would override the negative commandment. No, we have this special drasha aleha. From there, you learn that even when it's a makom mitzvah, just like it says by yibum, even when it's a mitzvah and she has to do yibum, she's still forbidden to be in a relationship with her sister's husband. So that was where we started. Then the Gemara asked, well, it's a unique case here. That's why we need a drasha, which means that it's not generally an issue. Usually, usually an ase would override a lotase, and not only would you have to say it happens in a general situation, it would even have to happen in a situation where there's karet involved, like our case. So to which the Gemara wants to know, number one, where do we know that generally ase is dochalotase, and where do we know that it's even when it's karet? So first we're going to answer the question about where do we learn that ate ase v'dochalotase. In yesterday's daf, Friday's daf, we had a whole discussion in daf Dalet about how we can learn it from tzitzit, because of the extra words of tzemer ufishtim, which are not necessary in the verse, because beged always means wool and linen. That's Rabbi Yishmael's opinion. According to Rabbi Yishmael, that's unnecessary. Therefore, it comes to teach us you can wear tzitzit and shatnez are next to each other in the pasuk, even if you have wool and linen mixed together, which generally you can't. But tzitzit can have a mixture of wool and linen, because the mitzvah of tzitzit overrides the forbidden shatnez. The Gemara says, though, Tinach letana de Rabbi Yishmael, that works very fine for him. But le Rabbanan, who disagree and think that any cloth in the Torah is not necessarily tzemer and fishtin, and therefore it needed to tell you specifically wool and linen, it's not unnecessary, in which case we can't learn from there that an ase overrides a lotase. A positive commandment overrides a negative. Can't learn it from there. So minalehu, so where do they learn it from? So we're now going to have 4 different options of where we can learn it from. And only when we get to the 4 and we realize you can't learn from any of them, each time the Gemara is going to reject, they go back to tzitzit and they're going to try to learn it some other way from tzitzit. So I'm already telling you that whatever we're going to learn, we're going to reject. Okay, just so you be prepared. So the first one is nafgalahu me'rosho. The first 4, all 4 cases are going to be about a mitzorah, a leper. A leper is commanded to shave his head. Okay, shave off all the hair on his head when he goes through the leper purification process. So now the verse there says, okay, we're in Vayikra, chapter 14, verse 9. V'haya b'yom hashvi'i, on the 7th day of the purification process, yigalech et kol sa'aro, he shaves off all his hair. Et rosho, his head, et skano, his beard, et gabot einav, his eyebrows, Ve'et kol sa'aro yigalech, and all his hair. Now, there's a lot of repetition here. Could have just said all his hair. Why did it have to then start telling you about the different locations? So the first drasha is going to focus on et rosho, his head. So ditanya, as it says, so first nafgalu me rosho. They learn it from the word rosho, that the positive commandment overrides a negative commandment. How so? Ditanya, as it says in a Braita, rosho matamud lamal. Why do you need that? Lefishin amar lo takifu pat roshchem. Well, there's a different verse that says you're not allowed to shave off the corners of your head, okay, the peot, which are generally the space in front of the ear. You're not allowed to, now it says you're not allowed to encircle the peot of your head, which has different interpretations what it means, but we're going to assume right now it basically means shaving off the peot, and some people think it means and leaving around all the other hair, specifically taking off then. Or we're going to see that this Tana thinks it means even if you're shaving off all the hair on your head, you're actually still forbidden to take off the peot. So now they say from the words lo takifu pe'al roshchem, shomea ani af mitzoraken. So you would have thought the mitzorah also, when he shaves off all his hair, he can't take off the pe'ot because that's forbidden in the Torah. Talmud loma rosho, that's why it says hairs on your head, which includes all the hairs on his head. That's why the pasuk was unnecessary, but it is necessary to teach you this. V'kasavar haytana, and this Tana holds hakafat kol harosh ma'akafa. That's what I just said before. That when it says lo takifu pe'al roshchem, it means even if you're going to remove all the hair on your head, you still can't remove your pe'ot. Comes the word rosho to say unless you're a mitzorah. If you're a mitzorah, then you can. And what do we learn from this? We learn from this that the mitzvah aseh of a mitzorah, of a leper, has a positive commandment to shave all his head off. That overrides the negative commandment to shave all your hair, including your pe'ot. So now the Gemara says, that's not a good reason. Why not? You'll find this interesting. This lav, this negative commandment, is not as strong as other negative commandments. Why not? Because it doesn't apply across the board. Why not? Doesn't apply to women. Okay, if you think sometimes people say, oh, they don't take women seriously. Here, women are totally taken seriously. Now, even though you might say, well, women aren't commanded in all the mitzvot anyway, well, that's only positive commandments that are time-bound. Those women are exempt from. But when it comes to negative commandments, women are part of all negative commandments, except for this one. Women can shave the pe'ot of their head. It's only a mitzvah for men. Because of that, it's a weaker lo taseh, because it doesn't apply to women, because it's weaker. That's why the positive commandment can come override it, but we can't learn from that to all other negative commandments. So rejection number one, rejection of option number one. Now let's go to number two. Ela akemis kano, your beard, that's also mentioned in the verse. Well, it's going to be a very similar kind of drasha, except that it's going to refer to a verse that has to do with Kohanim. Okay, the Kohanim specifically have a special pasuk that tells them, Titanyas kano matomu lomal. So first they say, okay, this is just a regular mitzorah. What do we learn for the words kano? Well, it must relate to a Kohen. Why? Lefi shene'amar, by a Kohen it says, upa'atz kanam lo yigalechu. The corners of your beard you should not shave off. Shomea ani af kohen mitzoraken. I would have thought from here that also a Kohen who's a mitzorah, a leper, is not allowed to. Talmud, because, right, he's forbidden. So Talmud Lamar's kano, that's why it says his beard, even if you're a Kohen, it comes to teach you. So now, this is also not shaveh b'kol, because shaving off your beard is obviously not a commandment for women either. So how could this be any better than last time? Well, let's read. Well, this is an imeno inyan drasha. Imeno inyan works like this. If you have a drasha that's teaching you something that you already learned somewhere else, which is basically this principle in Aseh, a positive commandment can override a negative commandment in a case where it's a weak negative commandment because it's not applicable to everyone, which exactly fits our previous case and exactly fits this case. So we don't need it to teach you this case. Now, when you have a drasha that teaches you something you don't need, we basically say Taneu inyan to something else, meaning learn from here to something else that's similar but a little bit different. So what are they going to say? Taneu inyan, right? Imeno inyan lalav she'en shaveh b'kol. We don't need this to teach us that the positive commandment of a leper to shave off his beard is to tell you we override the beard of the Kohen, that he can't shave off the corners of his beard. Well, Taneu inyan, right, which is a lav that's not shaveh b'kol. It's not something that applies to everybody because it doesn't apply to non-Kohanim and it doesn't apply to women. So Taneu inyan, the lav shaveh b'kol, it must be this is coming to expand that and coming to tell us even when it doesn't apply to everybody, even when, it applies to everybody, the negative commandment, the mitzvah to say the positive commandment is still going to override it. To which the Gemara says, no, I don't buy it. Akati itzrif. Even if you had Rosho that taught you that a positive commandment of the leper to shave his head overrides any negative commandment that's not applicable across the board, right, to everybody, you still wouldn't necessarily know that this would work for the Kohen. Why? Salkadat hachamina, you might have thought Shani Kohanim are different from the typical case, even though it's a limited mitzvah lo taseh, negative commandment that only applies to certain people. it's still, we might be stricter with Kohanim and not allow this mitzvah aseh to override it. Why is that? Kohanim have all sorts of things they can't do that other people can. Like, for example, they're limited in marrying. They can't marry certain people. They can't become impure to certain people. They have a whole bunch of extra things. So you might have thought, even if there's a negative commandment that they have upon them, like the pe'atz kanam, corners of their beards, you still might have thought that maybe that's stronger than a regular isur lav she'eno shaveh b'kol that's not applicable to everybody. So kamash malan didachi. That's why you needed a special drashav skano teach you, no, even in this case that it's kohanim, we're still going to let it override. But again, it's only going to work in cases where it's a limited negative commandment. It doesn't apply across the board to everybody. So let's try a third. Let's try Rosho again, but from a different Braita, a different drasha of Rosho. Titania. Now we're going to move to a Nazir Mitzvah. We started with a regular leper, then we moved to a Kohen leper. Now we're moving to a Nazir who's a leper, who becomes a leper. Now a Nazir has a special commandment not to ever cut his hair. Titania, Rosho, Matamud Lamar. So why is Rosho unnecessary, extra? What's it there for? Lefisha ne'emal ta'ar lo ya'avo al Rosho. You should never put a razor on your head, meaning you can't ever cut your hair by a Nazir. Shomea ani, af mitzorav Nazir king. What if a Nazir became a leper? Maybe he still wouldn't be able to to cut his hair at all. So even though the mitzvah is commanded to cut all his hair off, but if he's a Nazir, maybe he's not allowed to. Talmud Lamal Rosho. That's why it says Rosho, to teach you he can do it. Now again, you'd have the same thing. It's not necessary for this, so maybe you would learn from here to everywhere. Comes the Gemara and says no. There's something very weak about a Nazir. What's weak about a Nazir? Sheken yeshno b'she'ela. A Nazir, okay, if I'm a regular man, I can't ever shave my hair. It doesn't matter. I can't undo that lo taseh, unless, of course, mitzorah, which we just said, I have a mitzvah. But if I just decide today I want to do it, I can't. If I'm a Kohen, I can't. But if I'm a Nazir, and I can't cut my hair because I'm a Nazir, okay, we're not talking about shaving off the peot, we're just talking about getting a haircut. If I want, I can actually, Nazirut is something that you take upon by making an expression, I want to become a Nazir. Just like, why did I say neder by accident? Because just like you make a vow. Now, a vow, you can go to a rabbi and say, listen, had I realized this, I never would have made this vow. Nazirut is just a type of vow, and you can theoretically go to a chacham, an important person, and they can undo your neder. So if that's your Nazirut, basically, you won't be a Nazir, and then it won't be forbidden for you to cut your hair. That already weakens that negative commandment. Most negative commandments, we can't just say, oh, listen, I don't really want to do this. I'm not going to do it. Can't do that. But in this case, you can. So therefore, that obviously weakens it. Once it's weakened, you can't learn from here to regular negative commandments, right? If it's weakened, you understand, right? This is all a matter of power. The mitzvah aseh, the positive commandment can override it. If it's strong, then, right, the positive commandment can't override it. So now they say, and we're going to further prove that this thing about being yeshno b'she'ela really weakens it, because the ilo temahach, if you don't say that, hi dekaimalan, we know it to be a fact that even if we say aseh is dochelot aseh, ein aseh dochelot aseh ve'aseh. I was just talking about it like a scale, right? If you have an aseh against a lot aseh, a positive versus a negative, the positive is going to be stronger and it's going to override the negative. However, if with the negative you have a negative and a positive, that's heavier than the positive itself. And therefore, they're going to together override, the positive is not going to be able to override them. Now, why is this relevant? Well, in Nazir, it says two things about cutting his hair. It says, Tar lo yavo al rosho. He can't put a razor on his head, which means no haircuts. Negative. Also says, Kadesh yehiyeh, he will be holy. Gadel pera sa'al rosho. He has to grow his hair long. So that's a positive commandment. Now, if we said normally that, what do we see here? The aseh of mitzorah overrides an aseh and a lo taseh by a Nazir. Now, the halacha in general is that an aseh is not strong enough to override an aseh and a lo taseh, a positive and a negative. So how does it work by Nazir? If not, it must be weaker here, right? So again, if you put on your scale, you have an aseh on one hand, and on the other hand, you have an aseh and a lo taseh, but the lo taseh is very weak. then you still might say that the aseh can override the lo taseh, and that's what we have by nazir. So let's read it inside. If you don't say this, and the fact that we know it to be a case, and aseh does not override a lo taseh and an aseh, ligmor mi nazir. We should learn that that's not the case from nazir. We should learn if nazir is just a regular aseh, right? It's not any weaker because he can undo it very easily, and it's the same. Then we should learn from nazir that the aseh does override an aseh to lo taseh, because that's what we have here with his hair. We just learned that he can't cut his hair if he becomes a leper. So nazir my time alo gomri. Now, what's the reason we don't learn it by nazir? Because you can knock it down and say because you can undo it. Hachanami will say the same thing here. Okay, so we've tried. Again, what did we try? We tried a nazir. We tried a mitzorah. Right? We tried to learn it from tzitzit. We said according to the rabbis, we can't learn it from tzitzit. So then we moved to a mitzorah, a regular leper, rosho. Then we moved to skano, a Kohen leper. Then we moved to nazir from the word rosho again. And then we basically rejected all of those options. And now we're back to the beginning. Ela la'olam, turning to Amud Bet now. Nikra kama. It's really learned out from the first pasuk, what we originally saw about tzitzit, except we're not going to learn it from Semer Pishtin, because we said the rabbis don't think that Semer and Pishtin is unnecessary. So we're going to learn it from somewhere else. How so? We're going to try now 3 attempts till we find the third one will work, even though even the third one is a little bit difficult, but the third one in the end will work. So now they say, it said, it should say in the pasuk, tzitzit. And in fact, in Sefer Dvarim, it says, Gedilim ta'aseh. These are the verses that we're darshaning. It says in chapter 22 of Dvarim, pasuk Yud Aleph, it says, Lo tilbash shatnez, don't wear shatnez. What is shatnez? Tzemer ufishin yachtav, wool and linen together. And then it says, Gedilim ta'aseh l'chal arba knafot ksutcha asher techaseba. Okay, make gedilim, which we'll explain in a minute what these are, on the 4 corners of your garment that covers you. So now the Gemara says it should have said tzitzit ta'aseh lecha gedilim lamali. Why does it say gedilim? Shma mina lafnuye. The use of that word is unnecessary. It's true we needed a word there, but we could have chosen a different word, tzitzit. Right? Everybody calls it tzitzit. Why does it say gedilim? And it appears elsewhere in the Torah, right? In the Parsha of Shema that we say, Vayomer, right? V'daber Hashem Moshe lemo, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amart alehem. Right? Tzitzit. So why does it call it gedilim here? Must be. It's unnecessary. And that teaches us that an aseh of tzitzit overrides the shatnez. Ha l'shiur hudata. No, they said, what are you talking about? Gedilim is to tell you how many strands you need of tzitzit. Gedil is shnai. Okay, a gedil is like a folded over part. So that already is, twisted. Twisted. So twisted means you have 2 strands. Can't twist without 2. Gedilim, well, then you take gedil, which is twisted. That's already 2. Then you call it gedilim. You make a plural of that. That becomes 4. Aseh gedil upatleu mitocho. And then they learn you're supposed to make a gedil and then fold it over again. And that's going to become your 8. Okay, there's different ways of understanding this. Some people say you tie it and then have strings hanging down. That's actually the way we do it. But they understand from here that you get to 8. So you need the word gedilim to explain to you that. Im kain lemaka. So let's try a different one. Okay, now it's interesting. We're bopping back and forth. It doesn't really matter whether the unnecessary verse is in the Tzemer Ufishtin and the Shatnez pasuk, or the unnecessary one is in the Tzitzit pasuk. Either which way, it doesn't make a difference. We just need unnecessary words. So they say, okay, well, lemaka, the pasuk should say, Lo tilbash shatnez Tzemer Ufishtin yachdav lamali. Why do you need to say together? It's obvious. Don't wear clothes that have wool and linen. Whether you say mixed in together, it doesn't make a difference. It's obvious together. Shma mina lafnuye, that word yachdav must be unnecessary. If so, we can learn from there. But no, akate mebaile, we still need those words. Why? L'tochef shte tchifot chibur, tchifa achat eno chibur. You need 2 stitches for it to be considered together. You learn that from yachdav. If you sew wool and linen together and you just do 1 stitch, that's not really together. Therefore, you won't be obligated. You're only liable when you put 2 together. That you learn from yachdav. They have to be actually together. Okay? If you didn't have together, you wouldn't know that, so it's not unnecessary. So the third and final option, and with this we'll finish this section, shatnez lamali, shma mina lafnuye. Shatnez, why do you have shatnez? That's an unnecessary word. I already told you. Tzemul fishin yachtav. What's the difference if they use the word shatnez or not? Shma mina lafnuye, that word must be unnecessary. To which the Gemara says, what do you mean? Akatemi bayale. No. There's a drasha on that pasuk. Ad shehei shua tavoy v'nuz. It has to be smooth and combed. That's shua. Has to be tavoy spun, and it has to be nuz, which is put together. Okay, so now, according to this, it's not going to be nuz is attached. According to this, you need the word shatnez to teach you all that. So the Gemara says, Ela kula mi shatnez nafka. No, really, the use of the word shatnez can actually teach you all those things. Now, it's a little bit difficult because if you really need to teach you those three things, how could you say it's unnecessary and it's going to teach you that the aseh is dochad v'lo taseh? But some of the Gemara doesn't seem bothered by this. Rashi says, if it was, right, it could have said lo tilbash kilayim semru fishtin. Still, you would be able to darshan the tavi and the shua and the nuz and all that. But anyway, they seem to think that shatnez is enough. You can learn from that one word all of these things and still say it's unnecessary. And from there, you learn that the mitzvah aseh of tzitzit overrides the lo taseh of shatnez. From here, we can learn it to all of the Torah. Except we had two questions. First, we said, where do we learn the general principle that an aseh is yochel lo taseh? It was actually the second question. The first question was, does it really apply this principle also when there's karet involved? Okay, because karet's very serious. Now, until now, we weren't talking about things that are forbidden by karet. But now the question is, does it really apply? So, greda. We understand a positive commandment, a regular, greda means a regular one, can come and override a regular lo taseh. It's really the regular is on the lo taseh. That it can override a regular negative commandment. But lo taseh sheyesh bo karet, how do you know that it overrides karet? And why do we know that it does? Because what did we say? Because we needed the word ale to forbid her. Otherwise, it would have been permitted. And there's karet involved. So they're going to, again, try a number of different possibilities. We're going to have 5 different options. We're going to end in the middle of the 5th. We'll see there's some questions on all of them. Why don't we learn from Brit Milah? If a kid has a Brit Milah that falls on Shabbat, day number 8 is on Shabbat, you do the Brit Milah on Shabbat, even though it's forbidden to let blood, right, to create an injury in someone and have blood come out, and yet we do a Brit Milah. So how is that? Must be. Aseh of Brit Milah overrides the lo taseh of Shabbat. With Shabbat, you get skila, stoned. But if you did it without witnesses, without warning and all that, then you get karet. So there you have it. It overrides karet. But so there's 13 times where the word brit is mentioned in the Torah regarding Brit Milah. From there, they learn that this is a covenant. It's like making 13 covenants with God. Many times in the Gemara, they try to learn things from here and they say, oh no, Brit Milah is on a pedestal, unique spot. You can't learn anything else from there. So mi Pesach, let's try from the Korban Pesach. If the 14th of Nisan, the day you're supposed to sacrifice the Korban Pesach, comes out on Shabbat, you do it anyway, even though slaughtering an animal, forbidden by Torah law on Shabbat, but you could do it for the Korban Pesach. Well, that's different. Ma Pesach shekain karet. Now, we were talking about karet, but we were talking about karet with regards to the lo taseh. Now we're going to see the mitzvah aseh has karet involved. There's only 2 mitzvot, and interestingly, it's Brit Milah and Pesach, the 2 mentioned here, that when they're positive commandments and you don't do them, you're liable to get karet, even though they're positive and not negative commandments. So if someone doesn't do the Korban Pesach, they get karet. So that's why we don't want to push off. That's why it overrides. It again makes the mitzvah aseh much heavier than, much stronger than a regular aseh. That's why it overrides Shabbat, but you can't learn from here to other things that have karet involved, right? Karet in the negative commandment. To which the Gemara says, okay, mitamid, korban tamid, the daily sacrifice is brought in the temple every day, even on Shabbat. And there's no karet involved. You don't have to, if you don't bring the korban tamid, you can't get karet. It's a communal offering. There's no karet there. But there is karet for being mechalel Shabbat, for killing an animal on Shabbat. So how do we do it? So must be, it overrides even in a regular lo taseh, right? A regular mitzvah aseh overrides a lo taseh that has karet. Well, then they say, no, each time they find something unique about this, it happens daily. So because it happens daily, right, like Daf Yomi, right? Anything that happens daily has a lot of strength and power. And because it happens daily, it's going to override Shabbat, but not right? Just like we learned Daf Yomi on Shabbat, right? It's very strong. Doesn't override Tisha B'Av, okay, where we're not allowed to learn. But anyway, although there are a few different opinions about that, but anyway, right, it's not the most clear-cut issue, but basically most people don't learn Daf Yomi on Tisha B'Av. But we're going to say because they did it daily in the temple, that's why it overrides Shabbat. So now they say, wait a minute. We can't learn it from Milah because it has 13 Brito. We can't learn it from Pesach because it has karet in the positive command. We can't learn it from Tamid because that's every day. But maybe we could learn it from a combination of some of these. So let's try. So the Gemara says, Teti mitarte, let's learn it from two of them. So mehetiti, which two? Well, mimila v'pesach, if you put Mila and Pesach together, those no way can you learn from there because both of them shekin karet. They have karet in the positive commandment. If you don't do those two mitzvot, you're going to get karet. Of course, they're going to override Shabbat. Mi Pesach v'tamid, shekin tzorach gavoa. Both of those are things you do in the temple and they go to God. Can't learn from there. Sacrifices are different than everything else. Mi Milah v'tamid, if you learn from Brit Milah and Tamid together, well, shekin yeshno lifnei adibur. Both of those existed before the Torah was given. Now, you might remember this from Chagiga. This is only if you hold, beginning of Chagiga, aliba demanda amal, ola sheklivu se'el b'midbar, ola tamid hava. The question when the Jews gave the korbanot olah right before they got the Torah, which comes up actually after they got the Torah, but it's actually from before, in chapter 24 of Sefer Shemot, it says there they brought olot. Were those olot tamid or not? There's a whole big debate about it. Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, or maybe it was Hillel and Shammai. I don't remember. But olat tamid, what do we have there? That was before the Torah. So was Brit Milah. It was given to Abraham. So, right, aliba demanda amar, and this is according to the ones who say olah shekrivi yisrael b'midbar olah tamid havada. Olah that they were doing in the desert then was a korban olah, was a korban tamid, and then they say, so you can't learn it from those two because they have something unique about them that also makes them strong, that they were before the Torah was given. Comes the Gemara and says, so what about Mikulu Nami? Let's try all three of them together. Well, Sheken Yesh Lifnei Adibur. Also, Pesach was before the Torah was given. So basically, all of those have something unique that makes them much stronger. Can't learn from there. So those were our 4 attempts. We had 3 attempts, 3 different ones. And then the fourth, I call it the fourth, was a combination of 2 or 3 of all those. Didn't work. Ella itzrich, but we need it for this. You need the drasha v'aleha. For what reason? Because otherwise you would have thought ase dochelot, ase a positive commandment overrides a negative commandment with karet. Why? Salkadatach yamina, you would have thought tete mikibur avein. You would have thought to learn it from kibur avein. How do you learn it from respecting your parents? Tanya, it says in a Braita. You might have thought it overrides Shabbat. Talmud Lamal, Ishimo va'aviv tirau ve'et shabtotai tishmo. Again, we have a unique drasha to tell us. Kibud avayim is in the same, or it's really fear of your parents, is in the same verse as Shabbat to teach you that if your parent tells you not to keep Shabbat, you can't listen to them. Now, without this drasha, what would be? You could listen to them because the positive commandment of Kibud avayim would override Shabbat were it not for the drasha. So that's why you need a drasha by Aleha, because you would have thought that too without a drasha. Okay, so now the Gemara says, what do we darshan from this pasuk? Kulchem chayavim bechvodi. In other words, even your parents have to respect God, which is why you can't listen to your parents if they tell you to go against Shabbat. And Shabbat has karet, so there you have it. Right? It's without the drasha of Shabtotai Tishmoru, you would have assumed Kibud Avayim could override Shabbat. So, which means positive commandment overrides negative, even when there's karet involved. Now, this all assumes that when we say, if your parents tell you to desecrate Shabbat, we mean a karet related issue having to do with Shabbat. So that's what the Gemara says. My love, right? Let's say your parent says to you, slaughter me an animal. That's forbidden by Torah law. And you get karet. Cook me an animal. Also forbidden by Torah law, you get karet. And that's what the drasha is coming to say. And then it would teach exactly that. Without the drasha, a positive command would override. Here specifically, we have a special drasha to teach you no, but otherwise it would. It's exactly parallel to the Ibum, right? Without the drasha, you would have thought it would override. The drasha has to tell you it doesn't. V'tama dekatav rachmana et shabtatai tishmor. And then you would say the reason is because it says the words in the pasuk halav hachi. But if it weren't for that, it would override. But the Gemara is going to reject this and say lo. And I'll just continue to the next two words. Lav de mechamel. It could be if your parent tells you to do something. We'll get into the details in the next class. But to tell you something where there's no karet involved. There's certain things on Shabbat. See why mechamer is different. There's no karet prohibition. It's not, you don't get punished by karet for it. Maybe that's what you would have thought, but nobody would have thought it overrides karet on Shabbat. So with that, we'll finish for today. We're kind of leaving you a little bit hanging. Have a Shabbat Shalom or a Shavua Tov to all of you, and we will meet up on Sunday.